We're going to do our best throughout the day to stay on schedule out of respect for everybody's time and commitment to be here this morning. But we're going to start off this is going to be kind of new for the Legislative Summit. We've got an interesting kickoff to the program. You're going to hear from someone that's not been heard of for for a couple hundred years, which is kind of an unusual treat. And so what we have this morning, we're going to hear from, of course, you know, what I did, I immediately turned the page away from what I was supposed to have in front of me here. And but this morning, this is the tricentennial of Nacogdoches. 300 years ago, this town came together. And so part of what we're doing with this forum is to look at historically the role of Nacogdoches in East Texas and how that's been important to the forming and the development of Texas. And one of the critical characters in that the play, which is Nacogdoches, was Father Marhil. Now, we talk and we sing the song about the eyes of Texas, and with all respect to our friends from the University of Texas, the real eyes of Texas are in Nacogdoches. And there's a story, which I think we may hear this morning from Father Marhil, who was a missionary and came to Texas and worked with the cattle and Indians back in the day, and saved this part of the world. And it's an interesting story. So at this time, I'm going to ask Padre, Father Marhil, to come forward and just tell you a little bit about our fair city.
Buenos dias.
Good morning.
Welcome, my brothers and sisters. Let's begin with a short blessing. En el nombre del Padre, del Hijo, y del Espíritu Santo. Welcome to Nacogdoches again, the place I came to back in 1716. I will tell you about a short time that I spent here in Nacogdoches with the friendly Tejas Indians and the land that I loved. During those times, Spain and France were enemies, and the Spanish government was fearful that they would take over the eastern territory of the New Spain then. At the same time, the church leaders wanted to spread God's word to the friendly Tejas Indians here and harvest their souls. I was almost 60 years old at the time, but I was still a vessel of God. Looking back now, I like to think and can say that those years here in Texas were my crowning glories in life. The Lord walked with me, and we established a mission here, Nuestra Señora de Guadalupe, and 3 other missions in this area. One year we had a severe drought, and the animals and crops died. My Indian friends came to me starving and faint with thirst. They had lost all hope for rain. That night, while in prayer, the Lord came to me and said, "Fear not, have hope, for you shall have water." The next day, with a staff in my hand, I went down to the dry creek bed of the Lanana Creek, where I struck an overhanging rock ledge, not once, but twice, and water gushed forth, much surprise to my Indian friends. My people were saved that day with God's help. The holy springs still flow today and are known as the eyes of Father Marhil, los ojos de Padre Marhil. I will give to you today the only thing I have to give, and that is a blessing. Vaya con Dios, amigos. Go with God, and you will never be alone.
You have to admit, Father Marhil has aged very well in the last 300 years. But that's Tony Hasso, great resident of Nacogdoches, and wonderful people here. We're going to start this panel, and let me tell you what we're doing. I'm going to introduce our moderator, but let me tell you how this started. There are certain issues in the legislature we deal with, and certain issues we don't have the time to deal with. And one of the things I think we need to talk about, which we just don't have the time. When we get to Austin, We deal with topics, with issues, with transportation, with water, and all those things which are a responsibility we do. But one thing we don't talk about enough is the role of race and the relations we have with the peoples of Texas, and how we work together, and what it means to be a Texan, and how we come to live in this wonderful state. And so part of the thought was, as we came upon our tricentennial, many of the civic leaders here, we started thinking, and I say this with all sincerity, Nacogdoches really is the original melting pot of Texas, and you could argue in the United States, in the Southwest. That this is the place where the roads all intersected, literally, where many different populations of ethnic backgrounds, the indigenous populations, the Anglo, the Hispanic, the African American, all came here 300 years ago. And I think we would all admit that we haven't always got everything right, but we've gotten a lot right. We've done some things very, very well. The proof's in the pudding. We're sitting here in this room, and we're still getting along. We've accomplished a lot, and we've done well. But the fact is, we can do better. And how do you do better? I think it's having a frank discussion of those issues, dealing with race and diversity. And the thought is this, 300 years ago, Nacogdoches, as Father Marhil talked about, started. And then the mission and Presidio were established here, and here we are. So let's think for a moment, who were we then? And let's reflect on who we are today. But let's really spend some time and devote the thought towards who do we want to be as Texans? What does that mean to be in Texas with a diverse population, with the growing, with the many different people that want to live here, that are moving here? So I'm going to, with those thoughts, with that kind of genesis in mind for this issue, I'm going to turn this panel over to our moderator, Dr. Scott Sosebee. Dr. Sosebee is the Associate Professor of History here at Stephen F. Austin State University, and is also the Executive Director of the East Texas Historical Association. Scott also has a distinction and he's filling this role quite admirably, of filling shoes which frankly can't be filled, of Dr. Archie McDonald, who we lost not too long ago, who was a legend in the Texas historical circles, and was just one of the great citizens of Nacogdoches. But Scott has taken over that role. I'm proud to have him as a friend, as a member of the SFA Nacogdoches community. And please join me in welcoming Dr. Scott Sosebee to the stage.
There's not too many times I go to a podium and have to move it down from somebody that's taller than me. He's one of the few I have to follow that way. Travis, thanks for that fantastic introduction. And I'm glad to be a part of this. When I saw this, Travis began talking to me about coming and doing this, and he started talking about this panel. It made me very excited because I think this is a conversation that in 2016 in Texas we really need to start having. We need to start talking about where our state's going in terms of diversity. And as we've called the panel, who were we is important, who are we now is important, but maybe most important, what do we want to be? And that may be uncomfortable for some, because we may have to break out of the current modes that we think about. Before I give a short introduction of what we're going to talk about, I do want to introduce our panel to you here. We did have some of your programs and stuff. We had, obviously, the leadership of Texas has had a flu outbreak. And so we have a number of panelists who are scheduled to join us who are now flat on their backs, taking copious amounts of fluid and acetaminophen to see if they can get over their symptoms. But we did have some very fine people step in and pinch hit on this. Let's go from the far end and introduce our senator, our representative from the Senate here. This here, Senator Charles Perry. He's a Republican senator from District 28, which is up in West Texas. You can see the counties. I always love people that represent West Texas. The counties are there's 30 of them always, as opposed to those urban places. He's a native West Texan, and Senator Perry and I share the great joy of being Texas Tech alumni, right? Those of us that can claim that, we're a step ahead of everybody else, right? So thanks for Senator Perry being here. Right next to him is our neighbor from Angelina County, Representative James White. He's a representative of District 12, which includes most of Is it not 12? Did I get that wrong?
19, used to be
19.
12.
Okay, used to be 12. See, I'm on an old playbook. I'm a historian,
okay.
all right? They changed these things. He lives in Hillister in Tyler County on this. He went to Prairie View A&M, where he got a BA, and he's a U.S. Army veteran, and he also has his a Master's of Science and a PhD from the University of Houston. And we're glad that he's here with us. Now we have our two pinch hitters that set in that didn't get the flu and decided to join us on this. Right next to Representative White is Representative Larry Gonzalez. You're still in District 52?
I am.
Okay. Don't keep up with redistricting sometimes. That is Williamson County. See, he gets to represent one county, right? He grew up in Alvin. He used to be a vice chancellor for the UT system. He got degrees from UT and currently lives in Round Rock. And next to him is Marcia Farney, District 20. Okay, I only messed up one then, right? Our neighbors. Representative Farney is probably the bravest person on this panel because she used to be a classroom teacher. Let me tell you, folks, that's hard. It's very difficult. And she's also taught at university. She educated at Texas, our neighbors, Texas A&M Commerce, and also has her PhD from UT. And we're glad to have her here. As we move forward, panel, I'm going to offer just after this introduction, the primary goal that I want to have for our session here today is for us to be able to discuss the issue of Texas's diversifying population and how it's going to affect our state as we move into the future. I don't know how many of us realize, I think we have an image of Texas quite often from the way it's been portrayed in popular culture and unfortunately, many of our history books, that is not actually reality sometimes. How many of us realize that our state is the home to the most ethnically, multiculturally diverse city in the entire United States? Houston, Texas is the most diverse city in the United States. In Texas, not New York, not California, not all those blue states that claim those things, in Texas. Right? Our state contains sizable populations of various ethnic groups as well as races. Important to me, though, as a historian, is how we use the past to explain the present and the future. And what if I invited some of my students, but it's a little early for students to be up, so they're probably not here, but they hear me say this all the time, is what we must learn to do is to have a historical narrative that contains what I call a usable past, one that all Texans can relate to. For far too long, quite often we've relied on a historical narrative that is concentrated almost solely on the 19th century. I pick up Texas history textbooks and it kind of dismays me because you have about this much in the book about Spanish-Mexican period. All right? And you have about this much on things after 1900. And then about this much on everything between that. 2016, we're spent longer in the 20th century than Texas as a state ever did in the 19th century. But we focus on that way too much. Texas, we tend to still think sometimes Texas is a frontier state. We think of how the predominant Anglo population dominated the institutions of the state on this. We think about it's a very masculine state, and it's dominated by masculine institutions. But we're 100 years removed from Texas as a place that was rural and emerging, a place with a very immature economy, a place that was, to be honest, a backwater, was not important in the grand scheme of American history. But in many ways, that's still the story that we continue to tell about us, and it's not applicable on this. And not everybody in current 21st century Texas can relate to that story. In 2016, we are an urban state, one of the most urban states in the United States. Texas is more urban than New Jersey. We don't think about it that way, right? We're one that is diverse. We're a leader in technology. We're an economic giant. If we were our own country, we'd be the 11th largest economy in the world. We couldn't have said that in the 19th century. So I think that we need to welcome, to most Texans of 2016, we don't relate to those old tales, that old tale of what I like to call gun smoke and cows. That's not applicable anymore, really. And so we need to welcome a story that stresses how we become the state we are today. In other words, let's have a usable past for every Texan, not just a few. And I hope that's what we accomplish today to some degree. Our session is, we're going to keep on time, because we don't want Kelly to come in here and run us off. So what I'd like to do is go down first, just let every panelist take a minute or two and give us an opening statement of what their view of diversity would be. Representative Harney.
Thank you, and good morning. Thank you for coming out today. Well, my background is in public education, and I say that with a great deal of pride because I think public education is foundational to the well-being and the financial stability of our state. I hope you agree. Any amens out there? It's important. I am completely committed to public education and the importance of that in our state. And public education has absolutely embraced diversification from the very beginning because we have special programs for gifted and talented, special programs for SPED or special education. We have programs for the kiddos in the middle. We're able also to now, based on our last 2 sessions, we increased diversification by offering another option and different options for graduation. Something else that we've done is we've increased things with a career in technology because not everyone is going to come to a university and get a 4-year degree. And as a former classroom teacher and a former university professor in the A&M system, I can tell you welders, plumbers, electricians make a lot more money than I ever did, right? And those professions are honorable, good professions, often the backbones of our community, where they go and start their own businesses and create jobs. So we were able to honor that by diversifying things that we offer and recognizing the importance of all of those different types of career options. We've also been able to see things, I think, coming in like with STEM, with also providing things specifically for gender differences, where maybe some girls were hesitant to come in. One thing I've seen as far as public education with their diversity is that they're embracing projects and programs like Girl Start. Are any of you familiar with Girl Start? Where they come in, for instance, in Georgetown and free to the schools. This group will come in and bring in, for instance, a female astronaut to let the girls realize this is available to you. And that's what we want as teachers, is to let our students know what your parents did is separate from what you can do. The doors are all open for you. It's up to you. So for me, when we talk about diversity, it's getting people to own up to their own opportunities and responsibility to keep that door open, to be prepared to walk through that door. And I think that's real important to realize that we need to embrace wherever you are, wherever you start, to let our students know that's where you are now, but where you go is up to you. And as a classroom teacher, as a university professor, we're there to say we're going to help you get there, but you need to do the work to get there. So diversity to me also is something that should not be viewed as a hindrance. And I'll share with you in a moment my personal experience as far as being a female in the legislature and what that is like. I'll let you wonder what my experiences were, because I can't wait to share it with you. You know, there are stereotypical ideas, aren't there, about what it's like to be in certain places and do certain things. But I really believe once we let students realize that the door is open to them, and we make sure that they realize they need to take control, they need to be the one driving that car, not to blame mom, not to blame dad, not to say I don't like the teacher, but to empower that student to take control of their lives, regardless of their gender, regardless of their ethnicity, regardless of their financial standing of their parents. Empower our students to embrace who they are, where they are, and to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Larry Gonzalez. I am from Williamson County. For the purposes of this panel, I will give you a part of my background and bio that I don't say much, and maybe probably never ever said publicly. But I think for the purposes of this discussion, it's important to know where I'm coming from and why I'm saying what I'm going to say today. My great-grandfather came here, started the Spanish-speaking Pentecostal church in Texas. My grandfather came here also illegally, and he became a naturalized citizen when my father was in junior high school. My grandfather has a 3rd grade education. My grandmother has a 5th grade education. And together, working with their backs and their hands, they made a fortune because they worked very hard in a society where they weren't educated and they didn't speak English. My father went to the University of Texas at Austin. Cumulative, my family has 13 degrees from that university. Everybody in my family has at least one, maybe 2, like I do. The educational opportunity for my family was critical to success. My grandfather paid cash for all of us to go to school. My father's an aerospace engineer, 43 years at NASA, mission control, and we've done well. It's a long way from a guy who has a 3rd grade education selling cantaloupes in Pearland, Texas, who didn't speak English. And I've probably never have said that publicly because I said this last night to somebody privately. The issue we're talking about now is kind of a generational issue. My kids are 4 generations removed from that story. I'm 3 generations removed from that story. It's not something that I talk about or embrace or wave a flag about really because I'm just a Texan. People really like to prop me up on this Hispanic Republican thing. You'll never hear me say that. I'm a Republican who happens to be Hispanic. So I'm not one to sit here and talk about diversity, quite frankly, in kind of the way I think we're going to, because just Larry. I mean, it's kind of just it. My wife is Anglo. My kids are biracial. And thank goodness they're smart and beautiful like their mama. But my kids will benefit greatly from the work that my grandfather did 4 generations ago. My grandfather laid a groundwork that we will benefit from for a very long time. Now, it's my responsibility to take that and build it and make it better and make it stronger, continue to push my kids the way that I was pushed. But the opportunities that exist for my daughter as a 99 percentile taker of the PSAT as a sophomore and as biracial female, man, does she have some opportunity in this state. We met with her counselor, and her counselor just went on and on and on about how awesome that was. Yes. All the variables aside, she's also a pretty good kid. Without labels, she's still a pretty miraculous kid. Again, that's the mama side of that gene pool kicking in for me. But I think as we go forward, and we're going to answer some questions here in a second, I just want you to understand where I come from and kind of my background and who I am, because it does shape my thoughts on a lot of these different things. My family experience and my uncles and my aunts and the numbers of my aunts who didn't finish high school and worked very hard, and the opportunities available to a Hispanic female in 1963 versus a Hispanic female in 2016 for my daughter. It's a big difference. We've made some incredible, incredible strides. I think there are those who still like to talk about the differences. Isn't it important? We do. But I'm here to also tell you about the celebrations of a family named Gonzalez that in just 3 years have done 3 generations have done some pretty miraculous things, given some pretty cool opportunities. So when you hear me going forward, I just want you to keep that in your mind, because I don't think me talking to you about these issues means as much if you don't know my background on these issues. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Professor. And I just want to thank all my friends out there. It was District 12 at one time. That included Angelina County. And I see a lot of our friends from Angelina County, and I'm always indebted to Angelina County because they're the reason that State Representative White, well, there's a reason why James White is a state representative. I was once brave, too, as a classroom teacher. I don't know if Dr. Forney here ever taught at the middle school level.
Yes.
Okay, so you're really brave. I'm brave, too. We all Okay, and I want to thank my 2 colleagues, definitely my state senator, he's out there somewhere, for hosting this event, along with my House colleague, Representative Clardy. Usually I'm able to spot him out because he's very tall, but I want to thank him for inviting me up. You know, this is a very interesting topic. The media likes to lead with it. You know, certain candidates say stuff or don't disavow stuff, and it stays in the media on and on and Obviously, in the professorial world, there are a lot of subjects and topics and race and ethnicity. That seems to be a great market in academia. I probably participated in some of it myself at one time. And those of you that understood or experienced sort of my transition to the legislature back in 2010, you know what many people were saying in the Walmart line. Have you met the guy that's running in your district? And many folks said, yes, he's a very smart guy. He's a school teacher and a coach. And they said, yeah, we know that, but have you ever met him? And they said, yeah, we've met him. He's really a short guy from a very small unincorporated city in East Texas called Lonestar. And they said, but do you really know him? They said, yeah, we know his last name is White, but have you just ever saw him? And you know what they were saying. Y'all out there acting like you didn't hear those conversations out there. And that's part of, I think, what my friend to my right is saying. When we talk about this issue of race, we just really need to discuss it. But discussing it with frankness, I'm glad to see a lot of my friends from Austin, a lot of the thought leaders in Texas, because we are really responsible for that discussion. And for obvious reasons, and let's just put this on the table, a lot of my friends in Austin tried to use that issue and tried to bring up that issue in my races. Now, let me tell you, James White is an elected official and a candidate, and it's okay. But as thought leaders, we often fall into this paradigm and use it to the extent that many of my friends used it, and it was very embarrassing and disrespectful to my constituents. Because yes, they did know me. Yes, we did walk from door to door. Yes, they did see my face on TV and on push cards. Yes, they did know that I was black. And many of them 4 years ago or 5 years ago were Democrats, and that's changed. And they knew I was a Republican. So I hope that those of us, and of course none of those folks in Austin that brought those discussions up are in the audience, just to let some of you off the hook. Okay? So it's important that if we are the thought leaders in this state, we understand that all communities in our great state have had these challenges with race and ethnicity. They're still negotiating these challenges locally. They should have the opportunity to negotiate them and deal with them in the context of our laws and our Constitution. And we should not use these issues to feed various agendas and political agendas and objectives.
It's great to be here, and I'm glad that we have a diverse panel. I am the token senator up here. So, I have served, well, I didn't even think, that's, therein lies a problem, but you've belonged to many classes. I've got a few things to say, and I'm gonna do, this is Brother James to me, not Representative James. I mean, he started that, we started it, and in politically correct world we live in, people would view that as not proper. But I do remember some discussions in the House when I was in the House, and Saffronia Thompson, Miss T, at the end of a very contested debate, I don't know what it was, contentious, it was hours in, and at the end of it, she said, "We're all Texans." And that just hit a nerve with me and kept a pretty strong accord with me. But I'm gonna kind of talk a big picture in diversity, and then I'm gonna kind of hone it down to how it applies to Senate District 28, because no disrespect intended to anything that will be said up here or not. It's just for information only. I think the one thing that is not unique amongst any people group or any type of political protected class or whatever we talk about when we talk about diversity, you've got to consider And if you're people of faith, this will make a lot of sense to you. If you're not, then I hope I can make it make sense to you. But the original sin, which is self above others at all costs, regardless of the consequences to any. We're a fallen man. And so as we go through this diversity and we try to provide equal opportunity and legislate those things, there is one common denominator that makes that the challenge, and that we all are born into a selfish state. We want what's best for me, no matter what it does to you. So I think diversity, you have to consider that as an overall arching theme. We've almost diversified ourselves with people groups and classes and all kinds of different things out of a country. Synergy is the sum of the parts is better for the whole. We've got a situation, whether it's perceived or reality, and I think the Trump phenomenon, if you will, reflects this, that we've created an unprotected class by defact inside of a class. And that's, whether it's real or not, there's some perception and anger out there that's feeding into it. So diversity is a very sensitive issue because it's a people issue. I will say you can look at the Texas legislature and see the changing times of Texas, and that's a good thing. And that shows that the process still works. I will say that in Texas we lead the country in a lot of the diversity issues, specifically to corrections and criminal justice reforms, because of this gentleman here and some other people that have made that a passion. But specifically, when you talk about a usable past, I'm very cognizant of revisionist and the political correctness of the day to be controversial for the sake of controversy and looking at our past. But what you had mentioned to the past is reality of my world I live in today. We talk about cows and cowboys. Today, I will have veterinarians that will be shoulder deep inside of a birth canal of a heifer delivering a calf. So working with cows today is still a reality in Senate District 28. 40,000 dead cattle from a snowstorm in January on the South Plains is still the reality I live in today. Oil and gas wildcatting, where men and companies and women put fortunes on the line to wildcat wells, which is a part of our culture and our history and reflects the earthiness and the independent spirit that make us the state we are and the leader in so many areas, is still a part of my heritage today in Senate District 28. So as we talk about some of the evolutions, there's no doubt that we are more of an urban population, but we still have a very diverse group of people in this state, geography, economic, social, ethnic, whatever you want to say. So if we ever lose or are willing to lose some of those things that are still very real today, that are very much a part of our past, we lose who we are as Texans, and the nation loses a diamond. And so the challenges we face will always be the challenges that we meet in the legislature. My Texas Tech Health and Human Services Center, or Science Center, serves a 108-county region. Several of those counties are what called frontier counties. There's one person per 7 square miles. 50 of those counties have no doctors. 30 of those counties have no hospital facilities. So when you talk about only urban, I'm told that the current administration won 27% of the counties across the country to become elected. So we are very urban-centered, populist-centered, but you cannot lose the makeup of this state for any purpose or any reason or anything that we do. So therein lies Charles Perry's world. I could tell you about my background, and I don't have the challenges that some of these guys' grandparents and stuff did, but we're all Texans at the end of the day, and we're all Americans. And if we do not treat this discussion with the respect that it has and needs as we go about trying to find out how to govern humanity and the human condition, we will continue to get it wrong, and everybody loses.
Very good. All good answers, of course. Great. That's fine. I think we could start off with just some more specific questions to allow you to elaborate on some of your ideas about this. And one I would like to ask the panel to just, take a couple of minutes on is that, one of the things you hear all the time, and I don't actually agree with it completely, because a snapshot now and what we think is necessarily not going to be what it is 25 years now, because we're talking about human beings. But you hear the term demographics are destiny. quite often, and it's bandied about Texas quite often. But one thing about demographics do show that our state is changing. The makeup of our state is changing. The people coming in, we're not talking about just race and ethnicity. People from other states coming in, people from all over the world coming to live in Texas, and we are actually building a milieu that is changing constantly, and we're transforming our state. Some of you've addressed some of that quite often here in your opening statements, but maybe you can elaborate, and more than anything else, on what you see. What consequences do you see this change for Texas? And I'm talking about look in the future to the next half century, all right? And then particularly given that all four of you are leaders in our state, elected leaders, what must we do with Texans to capitalize on those changes so we don't lose, so we continue to be, as Senator Perry said, a diamond? So, how about we go this way, like a fantasy football draft, and we start down at the end, let Senator Perry go first this time so he doesn't have to be last.
Well, I think we'll rule the day if being from California ever becomes a protected class. I would hope that Texas and the leadership that's elected will continue to try to work through the challenges that a diverse state demographics and some of the social changes that we're facing across the state. I think we do have a commitment from the legislature to do that. Texas leads. No matter whether it's changing or not, Texas needs to continue to lead. And there's positives in changes and there's negatives in changes. It's all how you treat those changes. But I just think that before we get into the idea that change is inevitable, which I think people would agree that change is going to come, we don't jump to the conclusion that we necessarily must react to it today. I think if you have watched civil rights movements and things over time, that people eventually get to the right thing, and sometimes they need a little legislative nudge or some laws to push them there, but an awareness and education, social media, all of those things along that line continue to influence the public debate of the day, and you want it to be as organic as possible for people to come around to doing the right thing without a government-mandated diversity. It seems to me that the more we get government involved, the more divisive that we create situations in some cases. So I would hope that through education, my kids grew up in a colorblind world. I believe that in some respects. My kids were never knew the difference they knew James White as James White. It wasn't something that we didn't go out with a target every day and say, you're going to do this and notice they're different than you, but you don't notice that. That was just not the way we were raised. I can't say that from my upbringing. It wasn't. I was in that environment of a discriminatory or racist environment. It's just it was a different culture. But the last 30 years, I think that we've allowed kids and parents and education and awareness and breaking down of those barriers, and it has been some government influence or legislative that have pushed that initiative. But I'm very cognizant of the fact that the more we get involved to make things happen, we usually make bad things happen. So I would hope that through education, information, and a continuing to kind of go back towards, treat your neighbor the way you want to be treated attitude is prevalent, and that's why we want to have the relationship building. Government's not good at relationships. It doesn't have a heart. And I think that's something we need to keep up.
Okay, thank you. Before I was elected to the legislature, as I said in my opening remarks, I was a football coach. And at the end of the day, it's about fundamentals: blocking, tackling, holding on to the football. And I think that's the same thing in this issue here, even though dynamics are changing. So on the other end, even though you may run various offenses, have various defensive philosophies, at the end of the day, it's just the basics. So when we look at these changing dynamics, what we look at is let's focus on the basics. The basics are the ultimate equalizer and multiplier that we can give every young person in this state, and that's the best education possible. What's interesting about this is blacks in this state, and yesterday was Texas Independence Day, and the reason you could do firecrackers yesterday was because of Senator Nichols and I. But anyway, though, at that time, my forefathers and foremothers were enslaved. But guess what? In the Texas Constitution, and by the way, this state fought a war over public education, okay? But we have Article 7, Section 1. So we have some enduring principles in our Constitution, even though they didn't apply to a lot of people 200 years ago. We can pick those principles and use them today to prepare for these changing demographics. So a great education, which will feed, and with the legislature facilitating, an environment where we have the maximum amount of economic prosperity as possible. So as a legislature, kind of piggybacking on what my colleague in the other chamber stated, we don't necessarily need to parachute in on every little community issue. What we focus on is equipping, again, our people with a great education, maintaining a strong economic prosperity environment, and I think from community to community, from the Trans-Pecos to the Sabine, from the Panhandle to the Valley, our people will figure it out.
You know, 50 years from now, unlike Charles Perry, I probably won't be elected 50 years from now. Those Senate guys stick around for a while. You know, I'll tell you this, my crystal ball tells me that 50 years from now, Texas is not going to be very white. 2005, Texas became a majority minority state. Think about that, 11 years ago, Texas already became a majority minority state. Most of Texans are non-Anglo, right? What does that mean? I mean, people look toward my wife's school. She's an associate principal at McNeil High School. Where I live, worldwide headquarters at Dell. We've got Samsung, Freescale, National Instruments, you name it, high tech, Google, Apple, all right there within just a few miles of my home. When we talk about racial diversity where I live, what you have is they're coming from all over the world. All over the world. I think there were 37 nationalities at my wife's high school. They're coming from all over the world. Now, that is a racial diversity. It is not, however, a socioeconomic diversity, because these are very wealthy men and women coming from all over the world who take these very well-paying jobs. So when I say diversity, of skin color, yes. Is it the same kind of kid, though? Yeah. With the same parents pushing them pretty hard? Yeah. But that's where I live. But I recognize that is not the case in a lot of places. But in the legislature, we're voted to represent our districts. It's kind of in my title, like a little hint, like state representative, right? I mean, it's right there laying out for you. What am I supposed to do? Represent HD 52. And the needs and what's happening at HD 52 are very different than maybe around the state. You know, I used to think a whole lot better about where we are as a country on this issue until Trump got in the race. You know, I'm going to throw it out there. Because when a lot of my supporters came to me and said in September, but we like that he's starting the conversation. 100 times I said, be careful of the conversation he's starting. You may not like where it goes. Today, boy, what kind of conversation have we started? We may not like where it goes. My daughter's asking a lot of questions at 16. And we have some pretty frank conversations in the Gonzalez house about kind of what all that dialogue really means. James is right, and I kind of alluded to it in my opening comments. The great equalizer of all of the variables of socioeconomic diversity and racial diversity, kind of the underlying tone to all of it, is you educate them all. Everybody access. To me, it's the most important thing we do as a state. It's reflected in our budget. It's the biggest part of our budget. You educate the kids. You educate the kids and you give my dad a shot, right? You give them an opportunity and see what they do with it. When you talk about public education, ESL. ESL used to mean English and Spanish. ESL does not mean English and Spanish anymore where I live. These kids are speaking Mandarin, they're speaking Chinese, they're speaking, I mean, you name the language. They're coming into these classrooms now. Mom and dad are very bright, taking a job at Dell from India or Pakistan, and the kids do not speak English. Now, they're going to learn English, but ESL, even in the classroom, does not mean English and Spanish anymore. It just doesn't. I mean, it's an incredible diversity. The other subcategory of diversity that I'm going to throw out there, because I work a lot on it, when Marcia talks about not all kids are going to go to college, and there are some other opportunities out there in some other fields. You know, my little one's autistic. We've been very blessed with Representative Ron Simmons, who's here, to pass more autism legislation in the Texas legislature the past 2 sessions, because we're dads too. I need to make sure that my Alexander can be the best Alexander he can be. And when we do that, as a dad, as I clear this path for my kid, I'm clearing the path for every Alexander just like him. They took our insurance reform bill, 1484, we passed that, Ron Simmons and I passed with Senator Watson. They're now passing our autism insurance reform bill all over the country. What I did for my kid, helped tens of thousands of kids just like him in Texas, is helping tens of thousands of kids just like him across the country. So let's talk about diversity of our school population. What about special ed? The commission and I are going to have some very long conversations about special ed, because that's what I know. And not from a think tank policy or a white paper policy or some intellectual conversation. It's my kid. I'm a dad. When we passed House Bill 5, one of the most comprehensive education reform bills in 40 years Texas legislature I've ever seen, I had the opportunity to be a conferee. I don't know how many people in this room can appreciate what I'm fixing to say, but the special ed parents can say. They know what's in there. Between me and Dan Huberty, there are nuggets all over that bill for my kid. When it was demanded to us as conferees that we bring back a bill that had 2 years foreign language mandatory graduation, mandatory, had to be in there. You know what we did? We changed the definition of foreign language. Our amendment has HTML, Java, coding, things that my kid can do. That's a daddy. That's a daddy who worked right there. I don't know that Alexander Gonzalez can get through 2 years of German, but when you're going to demand of me that he must have 2 foreign language, then I'm going to change the rules a little bit. And I changed the rules a little bit to make sure that my kid can be successful. So when you talk about the diversity of our population and diversity of our public school students, diversity of career, diversity of opportunity, I will always stand up for the diversity of those kids that not a lot of people look after. I have a lot of colleagues working on STEM. I have a lot of colleagues working on, you know, incredible AP and dual credit, dual enrollment, a lot of people working on that kind of stuff. And I'm grateful for them. But for me, I will work on the other kids. Because the window for my son to have a job and live on his own and to have his own apartment versus living with Marie and I for the next 40 years, the window is small. And we need to be able to get together and make certain that my kid has his shot too. The diversity of public education is going to be first and foremost, continue to be my project as long as I'm serving.
I believe initially I alluded at the beginning of my opening statement to a lot of what could be construed as my answer to this, but I do really appreciate Representative White bringing up this Article 7 of the Education Code, because to me, words matter, and the Constitution should matter. And there's an attack on the public school system, as I'm sure you know. And one of the things that this says is that a general diffusion of knowledge being essential to the preservation of the liberties and rights of the people. It shall be the duty of the legislature. It says of the state to establish and make suitable provision for the support and maintenance of an efficient system of public free schools. My friends, that's the Constitution. Words matter. Standing up for what the Constitution says is what I think all of us are up here to want to do. And something that's essential for this about learning about the importance of this in my district has a huge number of retirees. Matter of fact, we were listed by several different magazines as Georgetown, Texas being one of the best places in the nation to retire. There are over 7,000, I think 500 homes. They're building another about 2,500 in the next 5 to 7 years. Georgetown, Texas is listed as the second fastest growing community of 50,000 population or above in the nation. And I want you to know one of the strongest supporters for public education is my retiree community. They are the reason we're able to pass our school bonds, because these folks are educated. They realize that we're not throwing money at education. We're investing in the future of our state by investing in every child, regardless of their color, their gender, the income of their families. So that is something I think is real important to do, to realize still that is an investment in the future of our state by investing in public education. The folks in Sun City are able to articulate their positions very well. And they do that with great clarity. So that is something that's been a real blessing to me, is to work with the seniors. When you think about diversity, sometimes there are stereotypical things. You think, well, the seniors are going to fight that. Not in Sun City. They don't do that. They're the biggest backers, the biggest volunteers in our public school systems. Many of those are CASA volunteers. Many of those senior citizens are also actively involved as being a mentor with our students, reading to the kids. It is amazing. So don't think just because someone's of a particular group you may have in your mindset that that is a group that will not be supportive. That can be your greatest support system you can tap into. So we should never look at the little girl and think she will not be strong in math. I had a parent tell me that once. She said, well, she's like me. She's not going to be very good with math. I got the little girl's hands and moved over here, and I said, well, after a year with me, she's going to be the math expert in your home. And I just thought, step away from mama, honey, because we're going to do a sea change of your personal view of what you can do. So I go back to the individual, that we need to have a collective mind view of empowering the individual. Your skin color is your skin color. Your ethnicity, all of that, that is part of who you are, but your opportunities are yours. And that's what I think we want to do. And also, I'm a former counselor, Representative White, so middle school and high school counselor. So I think it's very important, too, that as your counselors work with students, that we empower them. My high school counselor, because I made a B in Algebra 1, talked to me and told me that I should consider being an administrative assistant, which is what? A secretary. So guess what? For the next 2 years, I learned how to do what I remember now the names of these little fast machines that we did. I took accounting classes. I learned how to do shorthand. I would love to see her now, because now I have a PhD in education, and I wanted at one point to be a veterinarian. Folks, a counselor tried to close the door for me, and it wasn't until I realized there is, in my view, the glass ceiling is only there if I want it to be there. We can reach whatever we want if we want it bad enough. I believe that. My boys can be good writers. My girls that I have in class can excel in math and science. And I want every child to know that they can have anything that they want to choose to, willing to work at. We should help them. Thank you.
Thank you, panel. Because we're going to stay on time, we're basically done. But I do want to add a couple of things. First off, it's refreshing to see, first off, some of our state leaders come. You know, too often we get the filter of the media and the sound bite, and you don't get to know who these people are. Folks, in Texas, we still have citizen legislatures. They don't do this for a living because you have to be on food stamps if you did. So they give up their time to do this, and they're actually service oriented, and you can hear the passion when they talk about these things. So clap